Participate. Hey, everybody, welcome to Freedom Talk. I'm just proud to welcome Boone Cutler and Aaron Miller to Freedom Talk. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, everybody, welcome to Freedom Talk. I'm so glad to welcome Boone Cutler here, Aaron Miller. I'm going to start with you, Boone. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and your experience?
Sure. My name is Boone Cutler. I've written 3 books with General Flynn, specifically on fifth generation warfare. The series is called The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Prior to that, I served in the United States Army. I was a psychological operations team sergeant in Solder City. I wrote the ground game program there. And since then, I've been basically involved in veteran advocacy. Most of the time I've been out, and I continue to do that on the side. Actually, primarily, I guess I do that, and this other stuff I do on the side, however you look at it. But yeah, that's what I do, and I love talking about fifth generation warfare, regular warfare, all of this. And I'm glad you got me on the show today. Thank you.
Great. Good to have you here, Boone. And I've been fortunate enough to do a little bit of work for Spartan Sword, which helps with first responders and veterans to avoid suicide, something very close to my heart. Aaron, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I was in the United States Air Force for 12 years. I finished my undergrad in political science while I was went on to complete 2 masters, one in international affairs, second in management. And I'm pursuing a doctorate in public administration right now. I'm a county commissioner, and I'm the executive director of the Foundation for Liberty and Freedom, based here in Columbia, Tennessee. I do a lot of grassroots work, volunteer work with local and state level candidates, and I dabble a little bit in. I like to refer to it as irregular warfare in the political sphere, in the political spectrum, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here.
Yeah, and I'm a citizen. Obviously, I don't have military.
Wait. Hold up, Kelly. You didn't tell me you bought a ringer in this morning. You didn't tell me that was going to happen. I would have dressed up for this.
Only the best. Well, I almost wore one of my new T-shirts, so you're good though. You look very military. So.
At least you have a shirt on.
It's a step up.
Some of the time.
And for $2.99 a month, you can see Kelly at. Never mind. Never mind.
We're still working on the OnlyFans.
Hey, you're under my side hustle now. But I do consider myself on the front lines of unrestricted warfare, of fifth generation warfare, as Boone says, and as a testament to that, I've been arrested twice for speaking. I've written a lot about lawfare, and it's one of the tactics that this book talks about, Unrestricted Warfare, which was written by 2 Chinese colonels, and it is the battle handbook for the People's Liberation Army of China, the CCP. I want to start with a couple of items from that. I got a PDF and just highlighted some things. War in the age of technological integration and globalization has eliminated the right of weapons to label war. Mm-hmm. And with regard to the new starting point, has realigned the relationship of weapons to war, while the appearance of weapons is of new concepts, and particularly new concepts of weapons, has gradually blurred in the face of war. So I'm reading directly from a translation of this book, Unrestricted Warfare, and there you can see a version of it that I think is very telling. It says, "Wake up, America." We have to understand that we're in a new age of warfare. And Boone, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to just quickly run through those 5 different types of warfare or eras of warfare.
Sure.
And so it's gradually blurred the face of war. Does a single hacker attack count as a hostile act or not? Can using financial instruments to destroy a country's economy be seen as battle? Did CNN's broadcast of an exposed corpse of a U.S. soldier in the streets of Mogadishu shake the determination of Americans to act as the world's policemen, thereby altering the world's strategic situation? And should an assessment of wartime actions look at the means or the results? Obviously, proceeding with the traditional definition of war in mind, there is no longer any way to answer these questions. When we suddenly realize that all these non-war actions may be the new factors constituting future warfare, we have come up with a new name for this new form of war. Warfare which transcends all boundaries and limits. In short, unrestricted warfare. So that's the premise of this book, and it lays out the plan. If this name becomes established, this kind of war means that all will be in readiness, that information will be omnipresent. Information is a keyword. And the battlefield will be everywhere, including in your home and your sphere of influence, in your business. It means that all weapons and technology can be superimposed at will. It means that all the boundaries lying between the two worlds of war and non-war, of military and non-military, will be totally destroyed. I need to look at this slide because someone's blocking it here. Will be totally destroyed, and it also means that many of the current principles of combat will be modified, and even that the rules of war may need to be written. And Boone, I think that's also a lot of the premise of your book. And before I ask you about the 5 types of warfare, I have to recommend this book. I first saw this on the Epic Times, who I've done work for a few years now. War Without Rules by former Brigadier General Robert Spalding. What this book does is it takes this book, Unrestricted Warfare, which even in the translation is a little bit inaccessible in parts because there's some metaphors that come from China that don't really translate. And it breaks it down. So I highly recommend that book. But Boone, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what 5th generation warfare is.
Sure. And well, let's start this way. I'll do the 5th generation warfare, the eras of war, and then I could talk a little bit about gray zone and nonlinear warfare and all the things that implies, because it's what you're talking about, and it's very, very important. At least from my perspective, it's very important for people to understand the terminology, because we can't have continuity of action till we have continuity of message, and that starts with understanding terminology. And there's a lot of people who use certain terminologies and it's maybe a little off, or someone thinks, no, it's this thing, not that thing. And there's so much overlap in that whole nonlinear warfare space that that's where we break it down into the 5th generation of war. It's the 5th generation of war specifically, just like we have generations of people. We've got boomers, we've got Gen Xers, we've got millennials. We've also had generations of war, and it's always based on technology. So the first generation of war was pre-gunpowder, right? We're looking at things like Braveheart, where people just like pour onto a field and start beating the hell out of each other, stabbing each other, clubbing each other to death. Pre-gunpowder, right? Post-gunpowder is the 2nd generation of war. Now we see the people pouring out on the same fields, except they're shooting each other from across the field. That's going into the 2nd generation of war. The 3rd generation of war, the lethality of war starts really, really climbing. You're starting to see trench warfare. You're starting to see weapons put on machines like tanks and airplanes. You're starting to see long-range artillery. Again, the lethality of war gets very, very intense here. At the end of the 3rd generation of war, now we're going into things like atomic warfare, lethality increasing. How to destroy entire countries by decimating the land, right? That's what we're talking about, by decimating the land and then ultimately occupying it. We go in the 4th generation of war. Now we start backing away from technology in some aspects. We start seeing things like state actors using non-state actors to achieve political ideological goals abroad. For instance, like terrorism. Terrorism is a big deal in the 4th generation. Now we get into the 5th generation of war. And now this is primarily in the cognitive battle space. Instead of like during the 3rd generation of war where we're destroying land, now we're shaping the cognitive battle space of a country. So they will change. So the populace will change that country from within. So it is war without bounds. It's the combination of what we talk about when we say irregular warfare, hybrid warfare, unrestricted warfare. All of that falls under the umbrella of 5th generation warfare. And this is really important to know, because it's that non-linear aspect when we're talking about soft power, sharp power, hard power. and how statecraft shapes each and every one of these things going into a country. Soft power obviously is like the Confucius Institutes. They're putting out information. They're very big, proactive CCP. They're shaping the cognitive battle space through universities, showing people that China is wonderful and Marxism is wonderful and Mao was awesome and Confucius was great and this was a great culture. Soft power, right? It's the selling of an ideology. We go into sharp power. Now things start getting a little twisted. Now we're seeing misinformation, disinformation, psychological operations, influence operations inside that sharp power space. And of course, the hard power, that's where you're talking military force on force. And the combination of all these things within a nation also falls under that fifth generation of warfare umbrella. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So when we explain this thing of how things began and where they're at right now, it starts to tell people, oh, I see why things are happening the way they are. Now we start breaking into the levers of the levers of power, the dime framework, right? Diplomatic, informational, military, and the E is economic. These are the levers of power that countries use against other countries. By and large, most Americans don't even know these levers of power exist. They don't understand that we are in a fifth generation warfare where they are the target. And there's always been psychological operations, economic types of military operations to condition a country. There's always been lawfare. There's always been political warfare. But in today's world, focusing on that cognitive battle space is no longer just something that supports the other generations of war. It is the primary effort. And it works behind something called the panopticon effect. And the panopticon effect basically means they can see you, you can't see them. It is the invisible hand that works behind and controls the curtain we can't see.
Man, I'm telling you, I see this not only with citizens not understanding it, but sometimes leaders of military don't understand it because they're still measuring up our firepower to China's. And from what I read in unrestricted warfare, they understand, although this I think is changing, but they understand that the American military is superior. So they know that, and so they're focusing on other tactics, and they want us to be complacent, to think that everything's fine because we have the bigger military. I want to read another quote from the book. This then, speaking of unrestricted warfare, is globalization. This is warfare in the age of globalization. Although it is but one aspect, it is a startling one. When the soldiers standing at the crossroads of the centuries are faced with this aspect, perhaps each of them should ask himself, what can we still do? And that's one of the questions we're asking. If those such as Morris, bin Laden, and Soros, interesting, they mention his name a few times in the book, can be considered soldiers of the wars of tomorrow, then who isn't a soldier? And I'm skipping ahead. All of the boundaries between soldiers and non-soldiers have now been broken down, and the chasm between warfare and non-warfare nearly filled up. Globalization has made all the tough problems interconnected and interlocking, and we must find a key for that. The key should be able to open all the locks. If these locks are at the front door of war, and this key must be suited to all the levels and dimensions, from war policy, strategy, and operational techniques to tactics, and it must also fit the hands of individuals, from politicians to generals to the common soldiers. We can think of no more appropriate key than unrestricted warfare. This is scary because this is the CCP talking about taking us over. And I want to encourage you to go to realfreedomtalk.com. Look at the articles there, watch some of the shows. Yeah, Boone, you've been on the show before. That was an excellent show. And one article in particular I want to highlight really quickly is Orchestrated Invasion, the CCP border war, and how they are using unrestricted, out of control immigration as a weapon of war. So let's take a look at this real quick. So they talk about the Secretary of Defense going back to 96, 97, talking about the challenges that we are going to face. Threats coming from the Middle East, the Korean Peninsula, the spread of sensory technology, such as nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons, which is very interesting considering COVID, as well as projection technology, information warfare technology, stealth technology. Third is terrorist activity, illegal drug trade, crimes by international organizations, all of that coming over the border, by the way. And look at this highlighted, and out of control immigration. And that's something I wrote about. I have a number of contacts friends in Border Patrol, having lived down there, I was giving information directly from Border Patrol agents to the Epic Times, Ben Berkwam at Real America's Voice, you name it, writing about it, trying to get attention. And I don't know how many people are going to watch this show. I want to make it a series. But we have to be cognizant of this. People look at these events as isolated. Like, why the heck are the borders open? What's going on? You know, are they trying to steal votes? Well, that's part of it, but it's also a weapon of warfare. Boone, go ahead. You sound like you want to say something.
I'm glad you brought this up because, again, we get into the language and understanding what we're looking at. If this was a course to get a master's degree in, I don't know, irregular warfare, you know, you start in that bachelor's level area, and you'd be probably talking about the 100 level courses. You'd probably be talking about asymmetrical warfare. In 200 level courses, you'd be talking about specifically psychological operations, political warfare, economic warfare. And then once you pop up there around the 300 level courses, you know, I'm showing the progression here. We'd be talking about weaponizing diaspora communities. And a diaspora community is nothing more than displaced persons. It's people who are in a country that is not their country of origin. And when they move in groups, this is the diaspora, right? Diaspora communities. Within those communities, and there's probably a lot of great people in those communities just trying to find a better way of life, but they are just cover. Within those communities, there are people who are going to be active and participants in the type of stuff like you're talking about. They're going to be sneaking across the border, conducting psychological operations, conducting all types of different influence operations. They're going to be doing terrorism. They're going to be linking up with these criminal organizations. These are state actors employing non-state actors, like the CCP employing the cartels to make sure that people are flooding into the country, because it puts a tax. It's very taxing on a nation when you have an influx of people who require services. And it creates dissension because now they're taking jobs. We've had 1.3 million turnover on jobs going from people who were born in America to people who came here who were not born here. 1.3 million, that's a lot of jobs. It's a lot of displacement. We're also going to start seeing things like the coercing these groups. Like, for instance, say this is someone from China that's come in. This is someone from Venezuela that's come in, from the DRC. A lot of people coming over from the Middle East, from Africa, up everywhere from the southern border down. But how hard is it? And this is what happens. They sponsor people to go through, and then they kind of own them because their families are back home in their host nation, the nation of their origin. So their families are there. So they all have these phones, and they start getting orders. Hey, we've got your family. You know that. We sponsored you to get there. I want you to do X. And X can be just very, very basic disruption, such as like, we want you to walk down the street and start punching old ladies in the face. This disrupts society. People start losing their ability to feel safe at home. They start losing confidence in their government institutions being able to protect them. Look in Texas, look in Arizona, where there are these enclaves of this diaspora communities with cartels. The police won't have anything to do with it. They're overwhelmed by the situation. Again, overtaxing the system, creating disruption within a country. The pushing of fentanyl to our country. That is a bioweapon that is being pushed up into the country. Hundreds. I mean, how many have died from fentanyl right now? I mean, you can't keep up with the numbers because they grow so exponentially. All these things they break down a culture. They break down a society. And this is part of unrestricted warfare, war without bounds. Mm-hmm. And China doesn't have to roll up on our shores, you know, in a ship, in a boat. They don't have to land here in an airplane. They just have to destroy what we have going on, and then using the political warfare to change the culture from the political side, because most of the fight really is in the political sphere. We have to be able to control what our government does, and that has to be the consent of the governed, the will of the people. That's being eroded. So all these things are happening at once. But I want people to understand, when we talk about migration, when we talk about migrants, there's a technical term for this doctrine, for this technique that is happening, and that's weaponizing diaspora communities, a weaponized diaspora community. And that's what you're really seeing here. This is doctrine. This isn't my crazy idea. This has been going on a long time, but Americans are now seeing it. The UK, they've seen it, and look what's happening right now. Italy, they've seen it. Look what happened to Italy. Greece, look what happened to Greece. So a lot of this stuff going on. So
Yeah.
this is not a new thing. This is just new to America, and we need to get very oriented on what exactly the strategic objectives of entities and groups that are pushing these weaponized diaspora communities into the United States.
Absolutely. And England, by some accounts, is on the verge of civil war because there's a lot of rape and increased crime going on. And I want to, Alex Newman is a good friend of mine. You might have seen him on the Epoch Times, a lot of different places. He's in this new documentary called Beneath Sheep's Clothing, along with another friend, Dr. James Lindsay. By the way, get this book. Go to I believe it's beneathsheepsclothing.com. I know Aaron came over and watched that movie with us, but it explains what communism is and what it does. But they use a number of techniques. I'm going to play a little clip. I believe it's 2 or 3 minutes from Alex Newman talking about this.
UN has repeatedly referred to as the master plan for humanity. So in the last couple of minutes we have here, I just want to give you some thoughts on what we do about this. Well, let's go to the great Chinese military strategist Sun Tzu. In his book, The Art of War, he said, if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Folks, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's us right now. As Americans, we don't know ourselves, right? We've forgotten our history. We don't know what our Constitution says. We don't know how our government is supposed to operate. We don't know the incredible heritage of liberty and Judeo-Christian civilization that we have been blessed to inherit. We have no clue, speaking of an average American. In fact, your average American today has a bad opinion of America and our history, especially younger generations. So we don't know ourselves, and we have no clue about the enemy, right? Who's the enemy? People say, oh, it's Biden, it's Democrats, it's Trump, it's Republicans. We've got it all wrong, folks. So right now, based on Sun Tzu's formula. And by the way, generals around the world still study Sun Tzu today. We're in big trouble. Right? So the first step here is we need a proper diagnosis. Right? When you go to the doctor, you come in, you got a complaint. What's the first step? You got to diagnose the problem. And so that's what we need to do. First step, we've got to diagnose the problem. We've got a mortal enemy that hates freedom, that wants to enslave every last man, woman, and child. A regime that has slaughtered 100 million of its own people. Right? If they treat their people like that, how do you think they're going to treat you? Right, just let that simmer for a little bit. And I want to end with this, ladies and gentlemen, because this is actually much worse than just a CCP problem. This is an evil problem. We're dealing with the problem of evil that has plagued mankind from the beginning of history. And in Ephesians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul says, we're really not fighting against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, and against spiritual wickedness in high places. This is wicked. This is demonic. It is absolute evil staring us in the face. And of course, they put a smiley face on it. Oh, we love you. This is all for your own good. Baloney. Right? Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Don't buy that for 1 minute. They absolutely hate your guts. They hate your freedom. And if you're fortunate enough to survive under a CCP-led New World Order, it will not be a good time. So we must resist this at all costs, at every level, in every way, on the spiritual dimension, as a national security threat, as an economic warfare program, which it is, and on a biological warfare program. In every possible way, we need to resist. We need to resist at the local level, the state level, the federal level, the international level. And we must resolve right now that we will never submit to a communist Chinese-led world order or anything remotely resembling that. We will preserve our freedom. We will not allow ourselves or our descendants to be slaves. And that's all there is to it.
You know, great words by Alex. He's someone who will go to UN events. He'll go down to Switzerland to be part of,
Davos.
Thank you, Davos, to be part of the, what's the conference I'm thinking of? Gosh. Klaus Schwab's gig there. It's
World Economic Forum.
Yes, thank you, World Economic Forum. So Alex is someone definitely to watch. And I want to encourage everybody, support your independent journalists. And I'm going to do a little almost shameless advertisement here, but I'm working on the 4th issue, the August issue, actually September issue, I should say, of Freedom Talk magazine. It's free. Just go to realfreedomtalk.com. You can download a PDF. You can read it online, with a digital page turning. You can even listen to the articles, the whole issue at once or an article at a time. And what I'm doing is I'm bringing in independent journalists like Alex, like Dr. James Lindsay, like Eric Metaxas, and helping spread that word get the word out. So we want to educate people. And one of the things we have to do as a nation, I know we're all tired. We have jobs, we have kids, whatever. We have to keep working on educating ourselves. And this is the cover. You're some of the first people seeing it here, the cover of the September issue. And it's about quote unquote democracy, and how democracy is a term that's been appropriated by the communists going way back. I mean, you know, I believe Mao talked about it. I know Fidel Castro talked about it, and they put a new smiley face on something. I call it a new face on an old picture, you know, or a broken record that you're playing again, but playing it at a different speed. You might say, how can China can defeat the U.S.? If you go to realfreedomtalk.com and get on my mailing list, I'll send you some of these articles. I'll send you information. So please support your independent journalists. Support people like Boone, who's written some amazing books with General Flynn. Go on and buy his books. Where can we find your books?
You can find them anywhere online. But I like it when people buy at generalflynn.com. You can go to the books. You can find them all there. It's a little bit cheaper than you find it on the other online sources. And also, we kind of fund each other. We're not funding, Amazon and everybody else. So, you can do whatever's convenient for you. But I prefer people to go to generalflynn.com. Just click on the books tab, and they're all right there. And you can bundle them too. Get all three of them at the same time.
Yeah, and one of the things about the left, speaking of Soros and others, the CCP, is they will fund their own, even down to the small level. People who have little podcasts, action groups, activist groups, and yet still on our side of things, we're conservative, which means we want to preserve the values upon which this country was founded: liberty, property, and enjoyment of what we've worked for. But I find that the people like Boone, like me, like Alex, we're constantly going out saying, please donate, please donate. And a lot of us are doing this on a shoestring. We work full time. We do this at night, whatever it may be. So I want to shift a little bit, Boone. And I want to I know you have a little bit of time left. I want to ask, how can the average person fight back? So you're out there, you have a job, you're thinking, I can't be an activist, what are some practical steps people can take in this unrestricted warfare to fight back?
Well, I think the number one thing everybody needs to do is to get educated, to get smart on it. If General Flynn and I could have explained what the basics of fifth generation warfare were in less than 28,000 words, believe me, we would have done it. If we could have explained, how to fight artificial intelligence, focusing specifically on AI-driven psychological programming, which affects every one of us. And I can tell you how that works real quick. If you've ever been in the vehicle with your spouse and it's just you and your spouse and you're on the way home and one of you says, hey, we need some laundry detergent. By the time you get into your driveway, there's an advertisement for laundry detergent on your phone. I think a lot of people have seen that scenario, something very similar to it. Well, if they can do that, type of conditioning and make sure that you're getting certain information in your feed, if they can do it with products and services, well, don't you think they do it with ideologies too? Of course they do. This is all part of the game. So you got to educate yourself on these centers of gravity that are being used against you. And again, if we could have told you all about that in less than 45,000 words, we would have done it. It's come to organizing and mobilizing. Session 3 focuses on organizing and mobilizing and the things to do there and everything that you're dealing with and how to work in groups and how to put groups together and how to become self-reliant and sustainability networks, all that kind of stuff. Very, very important. If we could have told you how to do that in less than 43,000 words, we would have done it. We can't do it. It can't be done. So take it upon yourself for the first thing to do, soft imperative number 1, know your operational environment. You have to understand your operational environment, which means you got to get a little bit smart. And this stuff is just not going to be poured out to you on the news because guess what? The news is part of it. So they're not going to show you behind the curtain on what the doctrine is, what the techniques are to do these things. So you've got to understand that for yourself, and you got to take a little bit of responsibility to figure it out. And then once you're there, then the answers start coming to you because you're now oriented to your operational environment. Until then, you're just shooting in the dark, running uphill, and you're not hitting anything. It's really just kind of a waste of time. So you got to get oriented first. And that's where I tell people, where do you start? You start by learning. You learn what's going on.
Thank you so much, Boone. We're going to wrap up the first half and come back and really focus on Aaron. But first, I had the opportunity to go watch General Flynn's movie, talk to him in person, see you there, Boone. I consider you a good friend. You've really helped me learn and deal with. I'll be just frank, it's traumatic to be out there getting arrested and to be a citizen and be facing these things. And you sat with me for a couple hours at a coffee shop and helped me understand what was going on. I'm a better, effective fighter because of you. So thank you for your time. But if you could give a quick plug for the Flynn movie, and then I'll cut to a break and we'll come back with Aaron Miller.
There's probably not a better working example of what political warfare looks like, political assassinations look like, specifically within our own government towards our own people than what General Flynn has in his film. Flynn, deliver the truth, whatever the cost. He went through that political assassination. They did do a full-blown global influence campaign against him, all because he wanted to audit the black budgets of the intelligence community. That was a no-no. Okay, why was that a no-no? They've never been audited, and he wanted them audited. And the next thing, all this stuff happened to him. He's still recovering from that, but he's getting out the word. If you want to understand a lot of the aspects that have to do with fifth generation warfare, you've got to watch General Flynn's film. You can see it at flynnmovie.com. All the ways to stream it is available. You can get the DVD, but please watch that. So many people think that the man went to prison and he's a felon. Truth is, he was never even arrested. He was never convicted of anything. He was never arrested. The DOJ dropped the case, and he got a pardon of innocence, not a pardon of guilt. And he had to get a pardon of innocence because of malicious prosecution. And that's why he had to get the pardon, so the judge would stop doing what the judge was doing. It had nothing to do with guilt. He got a pardon of innocence. He's the only person in our country ever to receive a pardon of innocence to protect him from malicious prosecution. And that's why people should watch that film, because that type of lawfare, that type of activity isn't just being done against people like General Flynn. Look what's happening to the J6ers. Okay, again, it's conditioning. This is lawfare. What did that do? It makes people who are leaning towards the right afraid to assemble. But don't worry, the impact indicators are there that we are the majority audience, because if you look at things like where people can remain anonymous but still protest, they did. Look what happened to Target. Look what happened to Bud Light. People did protest. They did protest with their dollars and the decisions they make. And that's what will probably continue. And if we can get smart on all the things that are going on in fifth generation warfare, it will give people the tools, and it will necessitate them the ability to act without being exposed in some cases. And in other cases, it gives them the ability to act without being provoked into a situation which would cause bad optics, and the situations that would ultimately bring us down. So we got to get smart on these situations. And if you want to understand a lot of it, watch Into the Light by Mike Smith, watch Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost with General Flynn, read the books, pay attention to everything as Kelly's saying, and you can't go wrong.
Yeah, and watch The Final War by Joshua Phillip, narrated by Joshua Phillip on Epic TV. That's a really good one too. But Boone, I know you got to go. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure we'll have you back again. I've already talked to former Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer. He's going to come in and give us his perspective. He wrote a book called Unrestricted Warfare. But Boone, thank you so much. And please pass on to our friend General Flynn our gratitude for fighting the good fight.
Absolutely. God bless you guys. Have a great show. See you soon.
All right. We'll be back right after this message. Citizen journalism's on the rise. But why is that? Well, it's because the mainstream media is full of propaganda and lies. That's why I'm working really hard for you every day to bring you great information and to fight for the things that are important to you. So if you're tired of the lamestream media and politicians who make big promises but don't do a lot of delivering, invest in spreading truth by making a monthly recurring donation at realfreedomtalk.com/give. Hey, welcome back, everybody. I want to cut to a comment here on Instagram. Somebody said I'm assuming General Flynn, never should have been in that false court in the first place. Either it's a show or his lawyers suck. That's that person's opinion. But I will say this, having been dragged through the courts, having been falsely arrested twice, convicted once, Tina Peters was just convicted and found guilty of 7 of 10 charges. Because what did she do? She prevented the illegal destruction by one of the electronic voting companies and others of all the voting data from 2020. She did her job, and as a result, the trial she went through, I caught a lot of it, listened to the closing arguments. It was a joke. It was a kangaroo court. And before we go to Aaron, I just want to say there is a difference between rule of law, which really means the law is the law of the land, the law of the people. It's there to protect us and to uphold our rights, and rule by law, which is what we're in now. We have Merrick Garland and others who are ruling by law, misusing, abusing the law to beat us over the head. But I want to transition here because, Aaron, it was great to meet you. We've gotten acquainted over the past few months, and I want to talk to you a bit about what citizens can do at the community level, maybe politically. I know politics isn't the ultimate solution. It's not going to solve everything. Boycotts won't solve everything. We really need a renaissance of our spirituality, our belief of knowledge. But tell us some of the things that you're working on with your organization and what people can do at the local level.
Sure. And thank you, Kelly. I appreciate you having me on. So kind of not to steal any of Boone's thunder, but what he said there at the end, talking about getting involved, it starts with education. Exactly like he said, it starts with getting informed. So one of the models, and I use the term model, let's define our terms here. A model is just a lens through which you see the world. It's a structure by which you make sense of what you see. So in terms of political change or change of any kind within your community, the model that I built it's activation, mobilization, and engagement. Those are the 3 steps. But activation starts with education. It starts by getting informed. So one of the things that I've done is created a lecture series through the Foundation for Liberty and Freedom. You can go to our website at foundlf.org and look at some of those things. Shoot us a message if you want us to do a lecture in your area, or we can set up a web stream, anything like that. But a lot of folks are seeing these things happening in their communities, in their nation, and they're going, what is going on here? Why are they targeting our kids in schools? Why are they shoving this message down our throats? Why does it seem like all of the celebrities we follow and the shows we watch and our politicians, everything is geared towards this, that, or the other thing? They're confused. They don't understand. And if someone doesn't understand something that's going on, they're not going to engage with it. That's just, that goes back to when we were living in caves and we're going, I don't want to know what that rustle is over in the bushes over there. They're not going to engage with it. So the lecture series was to prepare people and explain to people why these things were happening. Why did the Summer of Love riots happen in 2020? What led up to all of that? So the Mapping Marxism lecture that I gave was a historical and philosophical building block into where did it start, where did it go, and how can we use that to understand where we are now. That was activation. And then the call to action at the end was look around the room. These are people in your community. You are all are now activated. Now mobilize. Look at the people that are in this room with you that are now activated. Get together, talk about this lecture over coffee, whatever it is. And then after you've mobilized together, now you can engage with it. Where are the focal points of these messages in your community? Is it in your school board? Is it in your city council? Is it in your library? Find out where it is, and then find out the individuals, the actors that are involved in pushing these messages, and then find out a way to neutralize that threat, neutralize that influence. And of course, by neutralize, to be very clear, because now we have to say these kinds of things, I'm speaking in terms of completely peaceful ways to do this. Yeah. And most of it is political. If you've got a city councilman that's pushing this stuff, run against him, primary him, whatever it is you have to do. But it all starts with becoming informed. So that's where it starts. But in keeping with our theme of multi-generational warfare, or 5th generational warfare, there is an overlap to all of this. Andrew Breitbart famously said that politics is downstream from culture. I think that's true to an extent, but I think it's also a closed loop. There are plenty of analogies we can use for this, right? So it's an ecosystem. So it is politics, it's legality, it's culture, it's information. All of these things inform one another. They all cohabitate with one another. So one of the things that I challenge folks to do is find what you are good at and find how you fit into that overall ecosystem. Kelly creates media. That's what he's good at. And so he uses those skills and those talents to fit himself into the overall framework. I'm a politician. I'm an activist, right? That's what I'm good at. How can I fill in that niche? And now we're working together on some of these things. Yeah. So it's about finding the other people around you, identifying what their skills and your skills are, and how you can fit those skills into the overall picture. That's the kind of the 30,000 foot view here. Yeah. But yeah, you have to understand how all of these things work and then empower one another to affect change.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I brought to Aaron and his organization that we're talking about, and there are various others who've entered the conversation, is lawfare targeting of citizens and politicians. But I found out through a lot of study, you can see shows and articles on this on realfreedomtalk.com, but I found out that not only was I targeted as a so-called domestic terrorist, but I was the first and only person specifically mentioned. Lawfare was leveled against me and my family. I'm not going to go into the whole story, but I experienced personally, particularly starting in 2020, it's been quite a while, I experienced this persecution from the government, and at a level that's unacceptable. I think it was 18 attorneys general called this targeting of school parents a massive fraud against the American people. And Merrick Garland was made to kind of backtrack, give a half apology. The National School Board Association did the same thing, and yet nothing's been done for these people. Lives have been devastated by this. And I'll tell you, your family can get death threats. We got plenty of that. You can be hit economically. You can be taken to court. You can sit through a kangaroo court like I did. This is very serious stuff. So one idea that I floated, and I took a group up to Washington, D.C., and we talked to representatives of 5 congressmen, and I've spoken with them directly as well, is the idea of helping citizens to defend themselves. And what do you do when there's so much corruption in the DOJ? And believe me, even previous to that, I spent about 3 weeks on Capitol Hill, and some of the honest, good members of Congress told me in whispered tones behind closed doors, this person sold out to the CCP, that person sold out to the CCP. So how do you get justice in this kind of environment when the law itself is being used against people as a weapon of war? And when you look at the situation, this is not conspiracy theory. There are people in positions of power who've been bought out by the CCP. I wrote on that professionally for 2 of the world's top anti-CCP Chinese dissident organizations. Look, I know what I'm talking about, and I've experienced it as well. So I came with the idea of, can we have sanctuary cities? Can we have sanctuary counties where people can go and say, look, I'm being persecuted by my own government, politically persecuted. I'm not being arrested or tried based on any real crime. I'm being arrested and tried simply because I choose to exercise my voice, because I go against the narrative. I showed a video today that's, I think, going around from various social media personalities. Tim Walz is the candidate for vice presidency now. This video shows groups of police going down neighborhoods, shooting paintballs at people and telling them to go inside during the lockdowns. I mean, the level of tyranny that we're experiencing is severe. We have Steve Bannon in jail. We have Peter Navarro, who just got out. Of course, we've all seen what's happened to Trump. He's now suing the DOJ for $100 million. I've written articles going into depth on this. For example, one of the biggest anti-CCP people, a Chinese billionaire who came to the U.S. and started saying what the CCP is doing, was arrested. The FBI took over his residence, and it mysteriously caught fire. Well, it turns out that Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI now, had been a lawyer for this individual. I mean, the whole thing's so corrupt. You can literally trace it. So what we need to be able to do is, look, somebody from any country, you can apply for asylum in the U.S., but where do we go? What do we do? We need to be able to go, whether it's to states, and we've had some legislation drafted on this. Some senators and members of Congress have drafted up some language, whether we go to states and say, I need political asylum, and we have some sort of committee or body that looks at that and says, hey, yeah, we do believe you're being politically persecuted. Or whether it's counties. And, there's this organization I'll get to in a minute. I have so many things on my mind all the time. I don't have the best memory. I promise I'm not pulling a Joe Biden here. But it's basically an association of sheriffs. And I just had Sheriff Mack on my show last week. Go back and watch that show. But the idea is that these constitutional sheriffs are the last line of defense against tyranny. And I hope you'll watch that show. It's so very important as this time goes forward that we protect American citizens, because the path we're on, I've said this for years, and at first people would just roll their eyes and say whatever, but now they're starting to see it. The path we're on can and will lead to the enslavement of the American people, to democide, which is the murder of your own citizens, if we don't stop it. History bears that out. The patterns are there. In fact, I had an 84-year-old German woman who used to come into a coffee shop we had and say it was just like this when I was a child. But Aaron, why don't you talk more about what people can do, and tell us what we might be able to do to protect people who are exposed to lawfare.
Yeah, so I'll touch on that first. I think it does start at the state and local level. So, unfortunately, the DOJ has captured a lot of Republicans in Congress don't have the stones to rein them in. I mean, we couldn't even fine Merrick Garland $10,000 a day for doing something that was blatantly illegal and that he himself threw other people into prison for.
And yet Stephen Bannon is sitting in prison for the same thing. But in his case, he could argue he had presidential immunity. Merrick Garland is just laughing at Congress right now.
Right. And this is the point. They know they have the power. They're not pretending like they're following the law anymore. The mask is off. So I think to a certain extent, we have to write off the federal government. They're not going to help us under this administration. It's just not going to happen. So instead, you need to go to your state level and your local level, and you need to target, has negative connotations. You need to speak to your sympathetic representatives and senators on the state level and say, hey, guys, we see this happening on the national level. We know the left uses sanctuary cities and sanctuary states and all this kind of thing. We need to take that page out of their book and do the same thing on the state level. If you can't get any traction on the state level, you need to go to your county sheriff and say, hey, sheriff, so there's model legislation for this. I believe it's in Montana and Oklahoma or Missouri. But essentially, if federal law enforcement wants to operate in that state or in that county, the county sheriff can say, hey, listen, you got to give me a heads up. You have to get authorization from me. And if you don't have that and I catch you on my county, I will arrest and expel you from the county.
That's reflecting what Sheriff Mack said on the show. And by the way, the CSPOA, you go to CSPOA.org. It's Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association. You can find out more about that by going to realfreedomtalk.com. And real quickly, I want to pause because the CSPOA is holding a convention in Orlando next month. If you'd like to donate to Freedom Talk, I could use some help with travel expenses because, I'm a guy, I'm a father of 5. I'm doing this on my own dime. So if you'd like to donate, go to realfreedomtalk.com and just look to the support us tab or go to givesendgo.com/freedomtalk. So what you can do too is that the CSPOA, Sheriff Mack said, has some funding. So you can go to your sheriff, and I would like to go to our sheriff and ask them if they would go to this, ask them if they would be a part of this. I'm good friends with Sheriff Mark Lamb, who happens to be cousins with Sheriff Mack, by the way. And we've talked a lot about the role of the constitutional sheriff. They are in some ways the most powerful people in the country in terms of protecting the people, because they are elected and they swear an oath to protect the Constitution and the people of the United States. Can you talk a little bit about that, Aaron?
Yeah. So sheriffs have extremely broad authority on the county level to enforce the law. They do take an oath to the Constitution. They take an oath to their state constitution as well. But they're politicians like anybody else. And this is where there's an opportunity for individuals within their county to apply some positive pressure. So there's a theory in political science called the fire alarm theory. And the idea is that any elected official is not necessarily, they're going to be less likely to act upon something unless they are notified that there is a problem, unless the fire alarm is pulled, if you'll follow the analogy. So we're really good as constituents at calling up our local representatives or elected officials when there's a hole in the road, or my neighbor's playing the music too loud, or like whatever it is. We're really good at letting them know when there's a problem. We're not very good at supporting them when they do something right. So when we ask them to do something and they follow through, we're not really good at saying, hey, thank you so much. You did this thing that we felt was necessary or that we wanted to see happen. We need more of that. Yeah. So what you can do as an individual is go to your local sheriff, go to your county sheriff and say, hey, sheriff, I'm really concerned about X, Y, or Z. I'd really like to see A, B, or C happen. And the more people you get together to call them or email them or talk to them at the local restaurant or coffee shop, the more likely they're going to pursue those things. I can tell you as a local elected official myself, if you fill that commission room, that meeting room with people, and they're all there for one specific thing, it has an extremely powerful psychological effect. On me, on the other commissioners that sit up there. We're going, oh, okay, there's a lot of people that I have to look in the eye now and say yes or no. It has an extremely powerful effect in that moment. So that's something that you can do. More broadly, if you'll allow me, Kelly.
You're sure, please do.
So there's a few things to unpack on the individual level that folks can do, but more broadly, there's a 3-step process. We are fighting an asymmetric war. And this is something like you look at Vietnam or Afghanistan or Iraq, where there's the big, powerful, well-equipped, well-funded force, and in those wars that was America, that was the U.S. And then there's sort of the underdog, the Vietnamese with the Viet Cong or the Viet Minh, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, or the ISIS, or these different sort of tribal fighters in Iraq. They're the underdogs. They're not well-funded. They're not well-equipped. They're the little guy. And we know how all those wars turned out. Yeah. So in this analogy, you're the little guy. Okay. We are fighting the big dog. We are fighting the federal government. So you need to look at this in 3 ways: offensive, defensive, and hearts and minds. So when you're fighting the left specifically, you need to be on the offensive. Mm-hmm. That means we need to stop thinking, hey, I shared this meme on Facebook, or I shared a video with my friends. All of your friends probably agree with you. You're not really making a difference when you do that, but there's a psychological effect. When you do that, you're going, all right, I did my job. I don't have to get up off the couch. That's a psyop. That's keeping you neutralized as a fighter. Yeah. You need to overcome that and go on the offensive. Go to your local city council meetings, go to your county commission meetings, go to these local events and become involved, and get other people involved as well. Be involved in your local political party or grassroots movement. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I don't want to cut in. Let me know when if I cut into your point. But
yeah,
speaking of the little guy and going to your meetings, I want to show a clip of what happened when I went to a county commission meeting. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure if I went to your meeting, this wouldn't happen to me. But let me know when you're ready for me to play the video, because I might have.
No, this is a good segue.
Okay, so I'm going to show you something that happened to me when I went to, and you can see this. I've been on the Eric Metaxas show, Steve Bannon's War Room, about this. But this is what happened when I peacefully but sternly confronted my county supervisors in Pima County, Arizona.
Well, you're going to hear this because your health department made us hear this.
Mr. Walker?
You're going to hear this.
Mr. Walker, if you don't watch your language, I'm going to have you escorted out of the room.
Your health department threw us under the bus, and the constant barrage of this kind of language
Sergeant at Arms
has been sent.
Please escort this man out of the hearing room.
No. Your health department threw us to the rage mob.
I've asked you to behave and to.
I have a right to speak.
Okay.
I have a right to speak.
Let go of the podium.
I'll censor the language, but you need to understand that my family has been submitted to threats. My family has been submitted to threats because of you. Death threats on my staff. You are violating my civil rights.
You are resisting.
I'm not resisting. I'm just strong. And you're going to hear from me. You're going to be getting a class action lawsuit. Let me get my things, please. I'll grab them for you. Is this how you want to do this?
Sir, I asked you to abide by
my
certain
phone.
rules, and you would not, sir.
Pretty unbelievable. And that was early on. And we've seen other situations like that. And, you know, we did get a lawyer. We had donations from people. We already were struggling because we had just opened a coffee shop and suddenly we're forced to shut it down, to shut down our dining room. But we got a lawyer and it became pretty obvious he was wanting to make a deal. He started with a settlement offer to the county of $2 million, but it came with a gag order. So we decided, we fired the lawyer. We decided, look, we're not in this for the money. We saw the danger to our country. And I've been speaking out ever since. I want to play another clip real quick and then we'll come back, because I want to play a clip from Sheriff Mack, because when I was sitting in that booking room with my hands handcuffed behind my back, never been arrested, halfway in shock, I turned to the arresting officer, the shorter man with the bald head there, and he said, "Why did you do that?" I said, "Because I had a right to speak." And I said, "You know, why did you arrest me?" He said, "Well, I didn't want to lose my job." And I said, "Your job is to protect people like me from people like that." Now I want to contrast that with Sheriff Mack.
Peaceful and effective solution we have is taking back America county by county, one good posse working with a good constitutional sheriff to erect the barriers, as Madison put it, erect the barriers against the encroachments of the national authority. Folks, we can take America back. We don't have to wait for an election. We don't have to wait for new legislation. We can do it right now with the sheriffs of our country leading the way and creating constitutional counties and cells of constitutional counties all over this country. And that's how we take it back. There is no solution in Washington, D.C. Do I hope Trump wins? Yes.
Yeah.
But are they going to stop bothering him and getting in his way? No.
Wow, I just got a comment off of Instagram here. Whoops, let me just remove this here. Somebody said, "Hi, I was there. You were amazing. You did nothing wrong. He should have heard you. He was, and they were wrong." I voiced that. So awful. And, you know, it come to find out the chair of the Board of Supervisors had set the whole thing up. We were never out of compliance. We never failed an inspection. And he made a false report himself because they wanted to make an example out of someone. And this person who posted that, I said, "You were there?" And she said, "Yes, I was so mad." This did make a lot of people angry. Mm-hmm. And I had a choice. And the choice was either I kowtow to this, I try to keep a low profile, make it go away, take money for it and go off and get a homestead somewhere, which is something a lot of people are doing. Or I confront it and I stand up to it. And it was a very personal decision. I told my creator, sorry, this is still gets me a bit, but I said, I will put everything on the line to help my country and to help these people. If it costs me my life, if it costs me my business, I'm going to put it all on the altar. And it's been a very, very tough path, but it's also been rewarding. Almost a year later, just shy of a year later, I was arrested again, this time for speaking out about the forced masking and abuse of children under these horrid COVID policies. So I don't, Aaron, I don't necessarily expect everybody, you know, I'm 6'4", 240 pounds. I'm a big guy, which often doesn't work in my favor. I can be portrayed as scary and threatening, but I don't expect everyone to be confrontational like this. Right. But we all have our talents, and sometimes it might be, you know, going to somebody's trial or bringing someone a meal or speaking out, going to the board meetings. Keep talking, please, about what people can do.
So to your point, so when I had my own experience, long story short, there were some pornographic materials in the local library. I called it out, asked the library director to resign. He did. And then the trouble started. So, you know, I got doxxed, death threats.
Yeah, I was going to say you were targeted as well.
Yeah, you know, it wasn't something that I expected or asked for, but it happened. And I learned a lot of lessons from that. You know, they threatened my child at the time. So these people are vicious. And one of the things that I recognized is not everybody has the same kind of threshold that someone like you or someone like I have. And that's okay. So what I mean by that is there are some people that say, I don't want to lose family or friends. I don't want to lose my job, with the exception of that law enforcement officer. If you were a law enforcement officer and you break your oath like that, you were a coward.
Yep.
And you should be ashamed of yourself.
Just following orders didn't cut it
Yeah.
in Nuremberg, and it's not going to cut it now. And one of the reasons we were targeted was because we had Back to Blue events. We had a superhero event. I dressed up like Captain America. I had to shave this gray thing here, but we were targeted because we had a flag in the window at a time when, if you didn't have that BLM flag, you could get your shop window broken.
Yep.
Even if you did. I remember a video of someone saying, but I'm with you, I'm BLM. They don't care. But you have to be willing to stand up, because if you run away now, and I don't want to criticize people who get a piece of land and everything else, but there's this idea that I can get a piece of land, homestead, be self-sufficient, I'll be just fine. No, they will come after you.
Yes.
And the Marxists, one of the first things they do when they get into power is they say, oh, you have 10 acres. This person has none. We're going to take it away from you and divide it up.
It'll just take a little bit longer.
Yeah, if you're not confronting it now, you're just delaying the inevitable, and it's going to get worse. So this is what I say, Aaron.
Yeah.
Support people like Aaron, his organization. Support the people who are willing to stand up on the front lines. And if you're sitting at home saying, gosh, what can I do? Go to these websites, see if you can donate a little bit, volunteer some time, Aaron, please continue, because I know you have some more good things to say.
And I know we're coming up on time here, so I'll make it a little bit more brief. I'm a politician. My nature is to be long-winded. The point being, people have different thresholds. There are costs that they are not comfortable making. And I'm not going to fault anyone for that. What I will fault people for is not getting involved at all. You don't have to do what I did. You don't have to do what Kelly did. You don't have to bear those burdens. We're not asking you to do that. You can show up to a meeting. You can send support to a local politician or activist. That can be monetary. That can just be a good word. You can pray. You can pray for the people that are on the front lines.
And sometimes just an encouraging word goes so far. I used to get a lot of messages when I was in the news, but now from time to time, someone still says, like, this person on Instagram just said, I left the country because of this arrest that I just showed, among other things. I never got the jab. You were respectful, and they should have understood how mad and upset. I respect you for that. Yeah. I can't tell you how much that means for me.
Yes.
Because when you're doing this and you're making these sacrifices, there are times, quiet times, when you think, like, did I really make a difference? Did I lose our family home? Did I lose my business? Have I lost all of these things for a purpose, or is it all for naught? When somebody encourages you, and I know you've been persecuted. I know Lindsey Graham, the Patriot Barbie, who's a friend of mine, she experienced something we did, having CPS called on you as a weapon, which is way out of bounds and crossing the line. People have been swatted. Just giving a word of encouragement to those people and saying, I saw you and I respect that. Yeah. I've had people say, I can't donate anything, or here's $5, but I just want you to know I'm praying for you. That's amazing. That's amazing.
So on the defense and then the hearts and minds, I'll finish this up real quick. So on the defense, we need to create a backbone among folks on the right. We have a massive problem with attributing our own morality to the other side. We like to say, oh, well, no, they would never cross this line, or they would never cross that line. And they keep crossing those lines. It's like that old Bugs Bunny cartoon where, he draws the line and they cross that. That is what they do.
And that's what they're counting on. That's the whole
Correct.
big lie principle, because the Holocaust, for a long time, people said, no, that's, if they had this term back then, they would have said, oh, that's a conspiracy theory.
Right.
The big lie principle is that you lie big enough, people will believe it. And people will, I call it the problem of reasonable people. Will say, oh, no, there's no way they're doing that. There's no way Fauci did that, there's no way it's creating a lab. They get away with these big blatant lies because people do not understand the nature of evil. But please continue.
So we have to set aside some of these ideas that, well, they would never do this, they would never do that, because I wouldn't do this or that. That's not how they operate, and they take advantage of the fact that we think that way. So one of the things that they'll do is these pressure campaigns or crocodile tears or whatever it is. I think this was even as recently as last November. We went through and I got some other county commissioners together, and we replaced all of the library board members. We waited until their terms were up and replaced every single one of them that were trying to protect these pornographic materials in our local library. And so one of the local leftists came up to the podium and called me a Nazi and a racist and a bigot. And he's just going down the list and check marking all of the names. And instead of going, oh, clutching my pearls and, oh my goodness, I'm not any of those things, I laughed at him. Yep. And it was like the Wicked Witch of the West having water poured on her. They cannot stand being mocked. No. The left wants more than anything else, except for maybe power, they want to be taken seriously. And if you look them in the eye and you laugh at them and you mock them, and they deserve to be mocked, yep, they cannot stand it.
And I would say try to show some discernment too, because there are people who are doing this sincerely. I personally experienced a mixed race Black and Puerto Rican lesbian couple who came to our coffee shop. They had been in the autonomous community in Seattle, beating the drums and everything. Mm-hmm. They woke up, they saw, hey, this is about Marxism and hate. And they ended up moving down from Seattle to Arizona and made a special effort to stop by our coffee shop and said, man, we respect what you're doing. So mock the really mean ones, yes, mock the aggressive ones, but try to discern and see if there are some people who are kind of on the fence or that can be reached with that message of humanity. And I want to say, please keep watching Real Freedom Talk. Go to realfreedomtalk.com, read the articles, subscribe for free to Freedom Talk Magazine. All you have to do is join our emailing list. And I want you to go back and read an article that I wrote in the August issue called When Christianity Bowed to the Cross. I'm not a Catholic. I'm no fan of the current Pope, that's for sure. But Pope John Paul II, look, I'm going on 55 in September. And so I remember very well the Cold War. And I remember Pope John Paul II. He was an absolute world hero. He brought Soviet communism to its knees. How did he do that? That's what we examine in that article. You can also listen to the article. But by and large, when he first came to Poland, which was unprecedented because they were under Soviet control, the first thing he said was, do not be afraid. And then he said, remember your spiritual heritage. Remember who you are. It took Poland 50 years to come out of first the fascism, which is a form of socialism, and then communist rule, but they kept fighting. Don't stop fighting. Don't be afraid. I get afraid myself. I'll admit it. It's something we all have to fight. But have faith, band together, stick together. Watch this show because we're going to continue this series. Tell us again where to find your organization and what you can do for people.
Yeah, so that's the Foundation for Liberty and Freedom. That's at foundlf.org. You can shoot me an email. There's a contact us button on there. So yeah, listen, we're about voter education. We're about educating communities on what is going on. Obviously, I'm a big wonky guy when it comes to policy. So the idea is if your community wants to learn more about a given topic, whether it's Marxism and political philosophy or foreign policy or domestic policy or whatever it is, we're building out presentations for all of these things. If it's how to become a more effective activist in your community, how to organize, whatever it is, we are here to educate. And real quick, wanted to touch on what you said about discernment. Yeah, when you talk to somebody, you can figure out in about 30 seconds whether they are a true believer or they're just like, oh yeah, we're just kind of along for the ride because we it's about love or like whatever it is. Yeah, you want to be discerning in your targeting, and with the hearts and minds, that is what that comes down to, is making politics fun and making it educational. So if you can have a clear conversation and they're making honest arguments, have those arguments and then use the Socratic method, use these different tools to drill down and say, oh no, this person's just misguided. They are honest actors. They do want to learn more. And then the other side, when they're making these dishonest arguments, when they're attacking you as a person, those are the people that you say, no, I'm going to mock you. I'm going to make this entertaining so that other people can see that you are a foolish person. So you're bringing in, you're separating the wheat from the chaff. You're bringing in the people that honestly do want to learn more. Make it fun for them. Make it part of, your political efforts. Make it a part of your community socially. Throw cocktail parties, whatever it is. And there are different strategies for that we can talk about in another episode.
Sure. Well, we're going to continue this series. In the meantime, if you have any questions, go to realfreedomtalk.com, hit the contact us, and we'll answer any questions you bring. Please share this content, share the website, and again, sign up for Freedom Talk magazine. My plan is we fund it by selling ads. I want to sell some more ads so I can help fund these guys. We can keep educating people, but like they say, always leave them wanting more. So I want to thank Boone Cutler and Aaron Miller for being with us today, and thank you especially all of you. Keep hope alive, be faithful, be strong, be courageous.